We're diving into a life today that it didn't just change comedy. It
Yeah.
really changed what America was allowed to talk about out loud.
Yeah.
We are strapping in for a deep examination of Richard Pryor. He was, I mean, you could argue he was the most powerful, influential.
Undeniably chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. The most chaotic figure in the history of American performance. Our source materials here, we've got biographies, film studies, historical documents. They give us the full picture,
Yeah.
the light and the dark.
Richard Franklin Lennox Thomas Pryor, born in 1940, he just completely redefined the whole idea of stand-up comedy.
Right.
Before Pryor, mainstream comedy, it existed in this kind of safe, palatable space. Pryor bulldozed those boundaries. He didn't just tell jokes. He was doing this trenchant social observation using a storytelling style that was just utterly raw.
Brutally honest.
Brutally honest, and a lot of the time deeply uncomfortable for the people watching.
And when you look at his actual style, his wheelhouse, it's just this full spectrum of intensity, and it all came from his life. We're talking observational comedy, sure, but also this intensely dark black comedy, improv, sketch work, and especially that razor-sharp racial humor.
And he put subjects on stage that were they were completely taboo for decades.
Oh, for sure.
Exactly. I mean, he cackled African-American culture with a total insider's view, American politics, race relations, and then his own intense personal stuff.
Yeah, that's where it got really raw.
Sex, pop culture, and maybe most famously, self-deprecation and his struggles with, heavy recreational drug use. He basically created confessional comedy.
He really did.
Everything he went through, the good, the horrifying, the mundane, it all went right into the microphone.
And the industry, they recognized that genius pretty early and pretty often, even if they had no idea what to do with him sometimes. Just looking at his accolades alone tells you the scale of his impact. We're talking a Primetime Emmy Award, 5 Grammy Awards, including the one he got posthumously, the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2006.
That Grammy run is just staggering. It really is.
Yeah.
Because it shows how quickly he connected with people after he, made that big change.
Right.
He won Best Comedy Album for That Nigger's Crazy in 1975.
An unbelievable title for the time.
Unbelievable. Then he followed it with, is it something I said?
Yeah.
In 76. And Bicentennial Nigger in 77. Those 3 albums, boom, 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 they captured this huge cultural shift.
And he wasn't done.
Not even close.
Yeah.
He came back and won again for the concert films, Richard Pryor, Live on the Sunset Strip and Richard Pryor,
Yeah.
Here and Now in the early 80s.
That 3-year album run, 75 through 77, that wasn't just a commercial success. It was a revolution.
It was.
Each one was another step deeper into the abyss of his own truth, and he delivered it with this fierce intelligence. But I think maybe the most enduring honor was winning the very first Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize for American Humor in 1998.
Getting the inaugural Mark Twain Prize, that just cemented everything. It placed him right in the historical line of American truth tellers.
It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. It's like an acknowledgement that his brutally honest comedy, it went way beyond just jokes. It was a form of vital social commentary.
Right.
It basically establishes him, looking back, as the founding father of the modern confessional style that really dominates stand-up today.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack this whole narrative for you. We need to trace the path of his evolution, starting from this deeply troubled kid, following his sudden controversial transformation into this massive cultural figure, and really trying to understand how his profound personal struggles informed and defined this genre-defining art.
It's a study in transmutation, really.
Yeah, turning pain into profound universal laughter.
Okay, so to really understand the fire and the intensity Richard Pryor brought to the stage, we have to start where he started, the environment that forged him.
Absolutely.
He was born in Peoria, Illinois, December 1940, and the setting of his childhood was about as far from conventional as you can possibly imagine.
It is the definitive context for his entire life. I mean, he grew up, quite literally, inside a brothel. Run by his grandmother.
Run by his grandmother, Marie Carter. This wasn't just a tough home. This was a world of desperation, of commerce, and real danger.
And the family context itself it's just staggering. His mother, Gertrude L. Thomas, she was a prostitute, and she struggled with alcoholism.
And his father, Leroy Buck Carter Pryor, he was a former boxer who also worked as a hustler and a pimp in that same environment.
So he's just surrounded by people living on the absolute edge.
So it was normal. And he was primarily raised by Marie Carter, his grandmother, who the sources describe as this tall, imposing, and profoundly violent woman.
Wow.
She gave him routine and severe beatings. And the heartbreaking irony here is that she would beat him specifically for showing any of his eccentricities.
The very things that made him a genius later on.
The very creative observational qualities that would make him world famous. It was like she was trying to beat the artist right out of the child.
And this unstable, traumatic environment, it led to some severe early trauma that he would later mine for his most honest material.
I mean, he was sexually abused at age 7.
Yeah.
And expelled from school at age 14. When you look at the origins of his comedy, that specific background, being raised by a violent matriarch in a brothel, surrounded by constant struggle, that is the wellspring.
He had no choice but to be tough.
And observant. And brutally honest about the hypocrisy he saw all around him.
And that background, that conflict and volatility, it followed him right into adulthood. After he got expelled, he served a stint in the U.S. Army from 58 to 60.
But service is a strong word. He spent almost the entire time incarcerated. In Army prison.
Wait, almost the whole time. How does that happen? What led to that?
The sources detail this deeply disturbing incident that happened when he was stationed in West Germany.
Yeah.
The flashpoint was a white soldier who was overly amused, laughing way too hard, the source implies, at the racially charged scenes in the movie Imitation of Life.
Oh, wow.
And this just triggered this visceral, furious response in young Pryor.
The intensity of that reaction must have been incredible.
It was. Pryor and several other black soldiers, they assaulted the white soldier, they beat him, and they stabbed him.
Jeez.
Fortunately, the soldier survived. But this tells you everything about the raw, explosive anger and the deep-seated sense of injustice that Pryor was carrying around.
Before he found a way to channel it on stage.
Exactly. Before he found his voice on stage, that anger just came out physically, and it led to his incarceration. This is the volatility that's just bubbling right under the surface of the man who would later make millions of people laugh.
It's a remarkable detail. It's also worth noting, though, that amid all this turmoil, the violence, the arrests, the prison time, he was a member of Henry Brown Lodge No. 22 in Peoria.
A Prince Hall Freemason.
Yeah, which is this fascinating structural detail for someone who would later become this champion of the counterculture. It's like he had these moments where he was seeking order and structure, even while his life was just fundamentally chaotic.
And moving into his early career, it's so easy to forget that the Richard Pryor who showed up in New York City in 1963 was not the Pryor we remember at all.
Not at all.
His initial comedic style was super polished, it was middlebrow, and it was consciously influenced by the giants of the past. People like Charlie Chaplin, Jackie Gleason, Red Skelton.
And crucially, Bill Cosby.
He was trying to fit that mold.
He was performing alongside this whole burgeoning folk and literary scene, people like Bob Dylan and Woody Allen. He was trying to be clean and acceptable, but the pressure inside must have been just immense.
And there's that one incredible, humanizing anecdote from those early days. It involves Nina Simone at the Village Gate.
Right. He was opening for her?
He was opening for her, and he was so paralyzed by what the sources say was severe performance anxiety that she recalled him shaking like he had malaria. He was literally shaking himself apart backstage.
The image is it's almost unbearable. This future genius, terrified of the stage. So what did she do?
She had to physically intervene. The story goes that she put her arms around him in the dark backstage, and she rocked him like a baby to calm him down.
Wow.
Just to make sure he was steady enough to actually walk on stage. And that intimate moment, the future greatest comedian of his generation being comforted by a musical legend, it just shows you how profound his internal vulnerability was before he finally broke through and found the voice that embraced all that fear and chaos instead of suppressing it.
That moment of sheer terror backstage, it's just the perfect backdrop for the pivotal transformation that came next.
Absolutely.
He was trying to be this clean, palatable Richard Pryor, right?
Yeah.
And that persona was getting him regular spots on huge TV variety shows. We're talking The Ed Sullivan Show, The Merv Griffin Show, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson.
He was on the exact trajectory to become like Bill Cosby 2.0.
But that trajectory just shattered in September 1967. This is the moment at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas that Pryor himself called his epiphany in his autobiography.
Right. He walked onto stage, saw the crowd, and just felt completely alienated. And the story is that Dean Martin, the ultimate definition of mainstream cool, was sitting right there in the audience.
And he didn't just bomb, he quit. Mid-set, he grabbed the microphone and yelled the famous line, "What the fuck am I doing here?"
And walked right off stage, leaving the audience and his entire career trajectory just hanging there.
Oh,
That was the absolute line in the sand. And the change was immediate and total. The sources confirmed that right after that walk-off, he instantly started using heavy profanity in his act. He fundamentally shifted his subject matter, his language.
including the immediate adoption of the N-word.
Yep. His 1968 debut album, which is just called Richard Pryor, it actually captures this transition period. You're basically listening to the sound of him deliberately destroying the Bill Cosby mold that had been trapping him.
And that change just accelerated in 1969 when he moved to Berkeley, California. That move geographically was so crucial. He immersed himself in the counterculture movement. He started connecting with radical figures like Huey P. Newton.
One of the founders of the Black Panther Party.
Exactly. And the influential writer Ishmael Reed. This political and cultural immersion just fueled this creative explosion in the 1970s.
And the 70s is when he truly breaks into Hollywood, not just as a performer, but as a writer and a real creative force.
Yeah.
He co-wrote for major TV hits like Sanford and Son and The Flip Wilson Show. And he shared an Emmy for his writing on a 1973 Lily Tomlin special, which shows you that his writing was sharp enough to be celebrated by the establishment, even if his stand-up was way too hot for them to handle.
And at the same time, his film career was just exploding. It really showcased his versatility, which I think people often forget because they focus so much on his stand-up.
That's so true.
You see him in serious dramas like Lady Sings the Blues in 72, comedies like Uptown Saturday Night in 74, the huge buddy cop hit Silver Streak in 76.
The start of his famous collaboration with Gene Wilder.
Right. And then the incredibly gritty and serious labor drama Blue Collar in 78, and even a family-friendly cameo in The Muppet Movie in 79.
It's a portfolio that just proves he wasn't just a comedian.
Right.
He was a serious actor who could handle incredibly diverse roles.
Okay, let's unpack one of the most famous and historically contested stories from this era, Blazing Saddles. Pryor was a co-writer for the 1974 Mel Brooks satirical Western, and the sources all confirm he was originally supposed to play the lead role of Burt, the black sheriff.
And this is where you see that intense friction between Pryor's talent and Hollywood's fear.
Yeah.
What's so fascinating here are the starkly conflicting accounts of why he didn't end up starring in it.
Right. So Mel Brooks, for years, has consistently said that the studio executives, specifically at Warner Brothers, they vetoed Pryor's casting.
And the reason Brooks always gave.
Drug arrests. And the fact that it was difficult, or maybe even impossible, to get him insured for the film.
Right. That's the Brooks narrative. However, our sources explicitly point out a pretty critical flaw in that version of events, which no studio executive from that time has ever corroborated Brooks's claim.
Yeah.
Not even after Pryor's death. So that leaves this significant vacuum in the official explanation.
And that vacuum gets filled by a pretty powerful counter-narrative. The director, Michael Schultz, who knew everybody involved, he claimed that Brooks chased him out because Brooks wanted total creative credit for the movie.
Right. The anecdote goes that Brooks had seemingly promised Pryor the role was his, only for Pryor to be completely blindsided when he learned from Cleavon Little, the actor who got the part, that the casting was done without him.
It just highlights that even when Pryor was at the absolute peak of his writing power and brilliance, Hollywood's structure was just incredibly tough and often betraying for him to navigate.
So was it racism? Was it liability? Was it creative ego? The sources give us compelling evidence for all three, but the result was the same.
He lost the lead role in one of the most important cultural satires of the 70s, a film he helped create.
And that battle wasn't just with Hollywood studios. It was in the record industry, too, all driven by these legal fights over rights and exploitation.
Yeah, so Pryor signed with this independent label, Laugh Records, in 1970. They specialized in comedy, but then later he moved to major labels like Stax and Warner Bros.
But Laugh Records refused to let go. After Pryor broke through with his massive 1974 album, That Nigger's Crazy, Laugh claimed they still owned the rights to his early recordings.
And they used that.
Oh, they implemented a specific exploitative tactic that lasted for almost a decade.
Which was what?
To fully capitalize on his now massive success with Warner Bros., Laugh just kept releasing older, previously unissued material, stuff recorded between like 68 and 73.
So raw, rough material that he probably never intended for mass consumption.
Exactly. And they made sure the audience would be confused enough to buy it. The sources note they would deceptively market these old albums by tying the cover art and the titles thematically to whatever his current hit movie was.
So for instance, when his big film Stir Crazy was a hit,
Laugh releases an old album and calls it Insane. It was a blatant and successful attempt to confuse the audience, draw in new fans who were expecting the polish of his modern work, but instead got his older, rougher stand-up.
It was a decades-long legal battle over who owned Richard Pryor's voice, and Laugh was profiting immensely from his past.
At the same time, he's fighting censorship on live television. His 1975 appearance as the guest host on Saturday Night Live, he was the first black host.
And it's still one of the most talked about episodes in the show's history because of that famous and intensely controversial word association skit with Chevy Chase.
That skit it pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on network TV farther than anything at the time. The raw tension in that sketch, where they're trading racial epithets, it forced the network's hand.
And the restriction they put on Pryor was monumental. He became one of only 3 SNL hosts ever to be subjected to a 5-second delay.
Think about that. Think about the fear the network must have felt about the most honest man in America live on stage. They needed a censor ready to hit a button 5 seconds before whatever explosive, unscripted truth Pryor might drop could reach the audience.
He tried again with his own variety show, The Richard Pryor Show, on NBC in 1977. He tried to bring that raw sensibility to a network format.
And it was a disaster. For the network, at least. It was canceled after only 4 episodes.
The content was just too subversive for late 70s TV. He tackled truly groundbreaking stuff. He had a skit about the first black president. He lampooned racism on the sinking Titanic.
He even did a serious non-comedy skit about gun violence.
Pryor famously said that while the network offered him 10 episodes, he decided he'd said everything he wanted to say in those 4.
Right. The takeaway here is that Richard Pryor was fundamentally unwilling to compromise his material for any censor, network, or studio contract. He put his authenticity above profitability again and again.
So if that decade was defined by confrontation with all these external boundaries, Hollywood, TV, record labels, it ended with a major internal confrontation. In 1979, at the absolute height of his success and fame, Pryor visited Kenya.
And that trip turned out to be this deeply transformative spiritual and cultural experience for him.
Yeah.
Upon returning to the United States from Africa, he swore this incredibly consequential public vow. He said he would never use the word nigger in his stand-up routine ever again.
This was a public renunciation of a word that, as controversial as it was, had been a signature, defining, potent part of his breakthrough act. It signaled that the confrontation with the world had evolved into a confrontation with himself and his own language.
The 1980s started with this almost perfect duality in Richard Pryor's life. You have his greatest financial success followed almost immediately by his most profound personal crisis.
The success came in 1980. He became the first black actor to earn $1 million for a single film.
That was for Stir Crazy, his huge second movie with Gene Wilder. He had finally achieved that undeniable top-tier bankability in Hollywood.
But just months later, on June 9th, 1980, the crisis hits. This is the infamous freebasing incident. While he was on this intense, long freebasing binge, Pryor doused himself in 151-proof rum and set himself on fire.
We should probably note there is a slight contradiction in the sources about the cause. While a public narrative, and Pryor's later on, suggested self-immolation,
Right.
The Los Angeles police at the time suggested the burns might have been from an explosion of a drug mixture being prepared rather than an intentional act.
Regardless of the specific cause, the result was horrific.
Oh, absolutely. He ran down Parthenia Street, engulfed in flames, until police managed to subdue him. He suffered second- and third-degree burns over half his body.
And he spent 6 agonizing weeks recovering at the Grossman Burn Center. His widow, Jennifer Lee, she captured the context of it by describing how the drug had moved in and it had become his lover, which is why she had to move out before it happened.
What's so unique about Pryor, though, is his almost superhuman ability to immediately translate this life-altering near-fatal trauma into comedy.
He didn't hide from it at all. He processed it publicly. In his 1982 special, Richard Pryor, live on the Sunset Strip, he incorporated the entire incident into his act.
He took the most horrific thing that ever happened to him and distilled it into a joke. He claimed the explosion was caused by dunking a cookie into a glass of low-fat pasteurized milk.
And he ended that deeply uncomfortable but undeniably hilarious bit by making fun of the media obsession. He holds up a lit match and says, "What's that? Richard Pryor running down the street."
That willingness to process profound, life-threatening suffering in real time on a world stage, that is the essence of his genius.
His recovery led to this massive professional expansion, but also a shift in his artistic direction. In 1983, he signs this groundbreaking, monumental 5-year, $40 million contract with Columbia Pictures.
And he starts his own production company, Indigo Productions.
This high-stakes deal, it guaranteed him incredible wealth, but it led to this tangible shift in his movies. He moved toward what critics and our sources call softer, more formulaic films.
Yeah. He earned an astonishing $4 million for his supporting role in Superman III in 1983.
And other big studio projects followed, like Brewster's Millions in '85 and his later movies with Gene Wilder, like See No Evil, Hear No Evil in '89.
So wait, he gets this huge $40 million deal, the biggest any black actor had ever seen. But the sources are suggesting that the quality of his work actually declined. Was the money actively compromising the art?
That's the tragic trade-off that really defined the '80s for Pryor. The freedom the money gave him also came with the artistic compromise that the major studios demanded.
He was still brilliant, but he was fitting into their molds instead of breaking them.
However, the source material does point out one crucial exception. The semi-autobiographical film JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling in 1986.
Which he wrote and directed himself.
Exactly. That film, inspired by the freebasing incident, it really channeled that earlier raw energy. It suggests that the drive to process his trauma never fully left him, even if he was spending most of his time making formulaic comedies.
He even tried for this total image overhaul with Pryor's Place in 1984, a children's show on CBS with puppets from Sid and Marty Krofft.
But even on a kids' show, he couldn't completely sanitize his material. He chose to deal with more sobering, serious issues than, say, Sesame Street, and that ultimately led to it getting canceled really quickly.
And this friction between the chaotic artist and the commercial need to be a bankable star, it also affected his reputation on set.
Right. As his star power grew, so did his reputation for being exceptionally demanding, disrespectful, and difficult during filming.
Gene Wilder's testimony in his autobiography, Kiss Me Like a Stranger, it paints a really clear picture of this. Wilder said Pryor was frequently late during the filming of Stir Crazy and developed this grandiose star complex.
Demanding a helicopter to commute to the set.
Yeah, just because he was the biggest star.
But the truly critical anecdote, the one that speaks volumes about the psychological tightrope Pryor, was walking balancing real trauma, racial sensitivity, and leveraging those dynamics for gain, is the famous fruit incident.
The watermelon anecdote.
Right. During a lunch break on the set of Stir Crazy, a crew member threw a piece of watermelon, like an impromptu frisbee, and it landed at Pryor's feet.
And Pryor just erupted, walked off set, announced he was quitting show business entirely, citing the deep historical racial significance of the watermelon stereotype.
And the sources suggest this was a moment where real, justified outrage over a racial slight just got inextricably tangled up with professional ambition. The discussion notes that Pryor may have been actively using these allegations of on-set racism, whether they were genuine or perceived, to force the producer's hands.
To get a bigger salary or better working conditions.
Exactly, and we see the direct consequence. The camera operator who threw the watermelon was promptly fired in the ending. Pryor came back to the set the very next day, according to the sources, all smiles.
It reveals this highly charged, difficult atmosphere around him, where real emotional trauma and historical slights were constantly mixed in with the pursuit of professional and financial leverage. It's a moment that really defines the complexity of dealing with a genius who is both deeply wounded and at times deeply manipulative.
He wrapped up the decade in a major way, though, with Harlem Nights in 1989. Sharing the screen with two other generations of black comedy titans, Eddie Murphy and Red Fox, it felt like a symbolic passing of the torch, even as his own health was beginning its final, sad decline.
You know, if Pryor's professional life was a high-wire act, his personal life was a total hurricane. It was marked by extreme intensity and chaos. He was married 7 times to 5 different women.
And he fathered 7 children with 6 different women, including his daughter, Rain Pryor, and son, Richard Pryor, Jr.
His relationships were famously turbulent. We know he dated the iconic actress Pam Grier, and she actually played this critical, supportive role. She tried to help him learn to read and desperately helped him manage his intense drug addiction.
But while he was dating her and getting all that support, he simultaneously married another woman.
His marital timeline just has this recurring pattern. Brief, intense connection, followed by collapse. He had 2 runs with Jennifer Lee, a brief 14-day marriage in 1981.
And then a secret remarriage in 2001, which lasted until his death in 2005.
And the discussion of his sexuality has become maybe the most recently detailed and certainly the most complex aspect of his personal story to emerge after his death.
Right. In 2014, the biography Becoming Richard Pryor acknowledged his bisexuality.
And that acknowledgement was amplified significantly in 2018 when Quincy Jones and Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee, publicly stated that Pryor had had a sexual relationship with Marlon Brando.
A huge revelation.
Huge. Lee and Jones both confirmed that Pryor was open with his friends about sleeping with men.
But the sources are careful here to present the whole picture, including the counter-narrative. Pryor's daughter, Rain, she later publicly disputed the Marlon Brando claim. So how did Jennifer Lee respond to that?
Lee insisted that Rain was simply in denial about her father's bisexuality. And this specific dispute, it ensures that you, the listener, understand there's no unified, simple narrative here. Even his own family struggles to reconcile all the different parts of his life story.
And Jennifer Lee offered a quote during this period that just perfectly captured the drug-fueled, hedonistic culture of the 1970s that they both lived in.
Yeah. She told TMZ on TV, if you did enough cocaine, you'd fuck a radiator and send it flowers in the morning.
It's an incredibly raw summary of the era.
And Pryor himself provided written accounts of some of his experiences in his own autobiography, Prior Convictions. He details a 2-week relationship with a trans woman named Matrasha, which he just called 2 weeks of being gay.
The key, again, is that he had no self-censorship about his history.
None. And that radical transparency, it went all the way back to 1977, long before any public cultural discussion of bisexuality in the mainstream. He openly admitted to sexual experiences with men at a gay rights show at the Hollywood Bowl.
And he was incredibly specific. He stated the incident took place in 1952 when he was only 11 or 12 years old with someone named Wilbur Harp.
And he openly disclosed engaging in anal sex during that encounter. I mean, this level of raw, public, unsolicited, personal disclosure of childhood abuse and complex sexuality was absolutely unprecedented for a major public figure. It truly became a defining part of his art.
As we move into the late 80s and 90s, those years of heavy smoking, drinking, and drug use, they finally caught up to him. We see his chronic health issues just rapidly accelerate.
He had his first mild heart attack at only 36 back in 1977.
Then, in 1986, he got a life-altering diagnosis, multiple sclerosis, MS script.
And by the mid-1990s, the disease had progressed so much that he had to rely on a power-operated mobility scooter to get around.
And true to his nature, even facing this terrifying, debilitating condition, he managed to turn it into a joke. He claimed MS stood for more shit.
That was his ultimate defense mechanism, transforming inescapable suffering into a punchline.
But the health crises were just relentless. He suffered a second heart attack while he was in Australia in 1990, which led to triple heart bypass surgery in 1991. His body was just steadily breaking down.
In his final film role, in David Lynch's Cryptic Lost Highway in 1997, it features him on the scooter. It's this poignant visual confirmation of the toll the disease had taken.
And this brings us back to that central theme of contradiction. In stark contrast to his volatile professional reputation and his chaotic personal history, he developed this incredibly intense commitment to animal welfare during his later years.
He became a vegetarian and campaigned vigorously for animal rights.
This side of him often gets overlooked, but it was a serious commitment. He was heavily involved in a very public and successful PETA campaign that targeted major fast food corporations like KFC and Burger King over inhumane sourcing.
Yeah, PETA recognized the power of his advocacy. They gave him a humanitarian award in 1999, and they continue to give an award in his name today.
This image, the fiercely compassionate advocate for the voiceless, it's such a surprising and beautiful contrast to the difficult Hollywood figure who struggled so profoundly with his own demons. It just underscores the complexity of the man we're studying.
Moving into his final years, we see Richard Pryor achieve one last symbolic legal victory. It's related to those early struggles that defined his whole career.
In 2002, he and Jennifer Lee Pryor, they finally won the legal rights to all of that exploitative material that was being held by Laugh Records.
That was nearly 40 hours of analog tape, his lost history, basically. The stuff Laugh had been profiting from for decades. Gaining control of that material was a massive victory. It ensured he finally owned the full narrative of his artistic evolution.
And this legal win, it paved the way for the authorized compilation Evolution Revolution. The early years, which came out in 2005, it finally gave his audience the full picture of his earliest, roughest work, including the legendary Craps After Hours album, released on his terms.
His final television appearance, just a simple cameo, was on The Norm Show in 1999.
Richard Pryor died on the morning of December 10, 2005. He'd had a third and final heart attack. He was 65 years old.
His widow, Jennifer Lee, was quoted saying that At the end, there was a smile on his face. The coroner later attributed the fatal heart attack primarily to coronary artery disease, caused at least partly by years of tobacco smoking.
His ashes were scattered in Hana, Hawaii in 2019.
And if the ultimate measure of an artist's genius is their influence, then Pryor's legacy is truly unanimous and total. He is cited as a major foundational influence by virtually every major comedian of the last half-century. George Carlin, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, Eddie Murphy, Jerry Seinfeld.
The praise borders on reverence, because they know they wouldn't exist without him. Jerry Seinfeld, whose style is so different, called him the Picasso of our profession.
And Bob Newhart went even further. He hailed him as the seminal comedian of the last 50 years.
And Dave Chappelle, one of his most direct heirs, he maybe summed up the evolutionary impact best. He described Pryor as the highest evolution of comedy, using that visual metaphor of the man walking upright in the evolutionary charts.
He represented the final, most complex stage of the craft.
And Bill Cosby's quote, despite their early professional separation and their own personal differences, it captures the essential duality of Pryor's work. Richard Pryor drew the line between comedy and tragedy as thin as one could possibly paint it. He showed that comedy could be inherently dramatic, even tragic.
His posthumous honors just keep coming in.
Yeah.
He was ranked #1 on Rolling Stone's list of the 50 best stand-up comics in 2017. He was inducted into the National Comedy Center in 2022.
And that inaugural Mark Twain Prize citation from '98, it really captured the final weight of his career. It honored him for striking a chord and a nerve with America, forcing it to look at large social questions of race and the more tragicomic aspects of the human condition. He didn't just entertain. He forced the audience to look inward.
His life just demands to be told over and over again. It's fueled numerous retrospective works.
Yeah.
Documentaries like The Funny Life of Richard Pryor, Omit the Logic, I Am Richard Pryor.
And we know the biopic Richard Pryor, Is It Something I Said? It remains in development, with Mike Epps attached to star and Oprah Winfrey as a producer. His story is just far too compelling and far too complex to ever be fully settled.
Okay, so let's try to unpack this whole journey. We've traced this central, undeniable duality of Richard Pryor's career. He took the absolute worst of personal trauma, child abuse, growing up in a brothel, addiction, the self-immolation incident, and somehow he transmuted that chaos and controversy into universally impactful comedy that it fundamentally shifted the comedic landscape forever.
He was a force of nature. But the contradictions are just staggering. I mean, this is the man who turned his near-fatal drug addiction into his most iconic joke, a joke that earned him millions.
Right. Yet he was also the same man who leveraged allegations of on-set racism for financial gain, possibly blurring the line between genuine outrage and professional calculation, as the source material suggests.
And then there's that profound public pivot, that vow he took in 1979 in Kenya to stop using the N-word in his act. It was a moment of deep ethical and spiritual reckoning.
So how does that moral clarity coexist with the difficult, sometimes manipulative Hollywood figure? And how does his intense, passionate dedication to animal activism fit into the narrative of a man who caused so much turbulence for himself and everyone around him?
It raises a really important question for you, the listener, to mull over long after this deep dive ends. How does an individual with such intense personal contradictions, such profound darkness and surprising light, remain so utterly unified and authentic in their artistic voice? He was a walking paradox.
It makes you wonder, the most authentic artistic truth often emerges not from stability or from peace, not from a resolved, clean life,
but precisely from the chaos and contradiction within. Pryor was the ultimate proof that you don't have to resolve your internal conflicts to create something lasting. Sometimes you just have to give those contradictions a microphone and the courage to set yourself on fire, both literally and figuratively, for the entire world to see.